Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Chapter 16, Through the Trapdoor. In years to come, Harry might in no way pretty recall how he had controlled to get via his tests when he half of anticipated Voldemort to come back bursting through the door at any moment. But the days crept by means of, and there might be no doubt that Fluffy turned into still alive and nicely in the back of the locked door. It became sweltering warm, in particular within the large study room where they did their written papers. They had been given unique, new quills for the assessments, which had been bewitched with an anti-heating spell. That they had practical checks as properly. Professor Flitwick known as them one with the aid of one into his elegance to look if they might make a pineapple tap dance throughout a table. Professor McGonagall watched them flip a mouse into a snuffbox. Points had been given for how quite the snuffbox was, however taken away if it had whiskers. Snape made them all worried, respiratory down their necks whilst they attempted to remember the way to make a forgetfulness potion. Harry did the fine he may want to, looking to forget about the stabbing pains in his forehead which had been bothering him ever given that his experience into the wooded area. Neville concept Harry had a horrific case of exam nerves due to the fact Harry couldn't sleep, but the truth become that Harry saved being woken by way of his vintage nightmare, besides that it become now worse than ever because there was a hooded parent dripping blood in it. Maybe it became because they hadn't visible what Harry had seen inside the wooded area, or because they didn't have scars burning on their foreheads, but Ron and Hermione didn't appear as concerned about the stone as Harry. The idea of Voldemort, without a doubt, scared them, but he didn't hold visiting them in desires, and they were so busy with their studying, they didn't have an awful lot time to stress about what Snape or each person else might be up to. Their very last exam turned into records of magic. 1 hour of answering questions about batty vintage wizards who'd invented self-stirring cauldrons, and they'd be unfastened for an entire exquisite week till their exam results came out, whilst the ghost of Professor Binns instructed them to place down their quills and roll up their parchment. Harry couldn't help cheering with the relaxation. That became far easier than I thought it would be, stated Hermione as they joined the crowds flocking out onto the sunny grounds. I needn't have learned about the 1637 werewolf code of behavior, or the uprising of Elfric the Eager. Hermione continually preferred to go through their exam papers in a while, but Ron stated this made him sense ill, so they wandered right down to the lake and flopped beneath a tree. The Weasley twins and Lee Jordan were tickling the tentacles of a large squid, which changed into basking within the warm shallows. No greater reading, Ron sighed happily, stretching out on the grass. You may appearance greater pleased, Harry, we were given per week earlier than we find out how badly we've carried out, there's no need to worry but. Harry became rubbing his brow. I desire I knew what this indicates, he burst out angrily. My scar keeps hurting, it's passed off earlier then, but by no means as regularly as this. Go to Madame Pomfrey, Hermione suggested. I'm now not unwell, stated Harry. I assume it's a warning, it manner threats coming. Ron couldn't get worked up, it changed into too hot. Harry, loosen up, Hermione's proper, the stone's safe as long as Dumbledore's round. Besides, we've never had any proof Snape discovered out the way to get past Fluffy. He nearly had his leg ripped off as soon as, he's not going to attempt it once more in a hurry. And Neville will play Quidditch for England earlier than Hagrid lets Dumbledore down. Harry nodded, however he couldn't shake off a lurking feeling that there was something he'd forgotten to do, something important. When he tried to explain this, Hermione stated, that's just the tests. I woke up remaining night and changed into midway through my transfiguration notes earlier than I remembered we'd performed that 1. Harry became quite sure the unsettled feeling didn't have anything to do with work, even though He watched an owl flutter closer to the faculty across the brilliant blue sky, a notice clamped in its mouth. Hagrid turned into the only one that ever sent him letters. Hagrid would never betray Dumbledore. Hagrid might in no way inform all and sundry. The way to get past Fluffy, in no way, but... Harry unexpectedly jumped to his foot. "Wherein were you going?" stated Ron sleepily. "I've just notion of something," stated Harry. He had become white. "We were given to head and notice Hagrid, now." "Why?" panted Hermione, hurrying to keep up. "Don't you believe you studied? It's a bit peculiar," said Harry, scrambling up the grassy slope, "that what Hagrid wishes more than something else is a dragon, and a stranger turns up who simply occurs to have an egg in his pocket." "How many people wander round with dragon eggs if it's in opposition to wizard law?" "Fortunate they," observed Hagrid. "Don't you watched?" "Why didn't I see it before?" "What are you talking about?" said Ron, but Harry, sprinting across the grounds closer to the wooded area, didn't answer. Hagrid became sitting in an armchair outdoor his residence. His trousers and sleeves had been rolled up, and he turned into shelling peas right into a massive bowl. "Hello," he said, smiling. "Finished your assessments? We're given time for a drink?" "Sure, please," stated Ron, but Harry cut him off. "No, we're in a hurry. Hagrid, I were given to ask you something. You understand? That night time you gained Norbert? What did the stranger you had been gambling playing cards with seem like?" "Dunno," said Hagrid casually. He wouldn't take his cloak off. He noticed the three of them appearance bowled over and raised his eyebrows. "It's now not that uncommon. Yeah, get plenty o' funny folks in the Hog's Head. That's the pub down within the village. Might have been a dragon dealer, mightn't he? I never saw his face, he kept his hood up." Harry sank down next to the bowl of peas. "What did you communicate to him?" "Approximately, Hagrid? Did you mention Hogwarts at all?" "Might arise," stated Hagrid, frowning as he attempted to bear in mind. "Yeah, he asked what I did, and I advised him I used to be gamekeeper right here. He asked a bit approximately the sort of creatures I took after, so I told him, and I said what I'd continually simply wanted become a dragon, and then, I will do not forget to properly, 'cause he stored buyin' me beverages, let's see, yeah, then he stated he had the dragon egg. And we ought to play cards fair it if I desired, however he had ter be sure I ought to take care of it, he didn't need it ter pass ter any antique domestic, so I informed him, after Fluffy, a dragon might be smooth." "And did he seem interested in Fluffy?" Harry asked, looking to maintain his voice calm. "Properly, yeah. What number of three-headed puppies d'ye meet, even around Hogwarts? So I told him, Fluffy's a chunk o' cake if ya realize a way to calm him down, just play him a bit o' music and he'll cross immediately off ter sleep." Hagrid abruptly looked horrified. "I shouldn't ha' instructed ya that," he blurted out. "Forget about I said it. Hi there. Wherein were ye goin'?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione didn't speak to each different in any respect till they came to a halt in the front corridor, which seemed very bloodless and gloomy after the grounds. "We were given to visit Dumbledore," stated Harry. Hagrid instructed that stranger the way to get past Fluffy, and it became either Snape or Voldemort beneath that cloak. It need to be been easy, as soon as he'd got Hagrid drunk. I simply hope Dumbledore believes us. Firenze may back us up if Bane doesn't forestall him. Where'n's Dumbledore's workplace? They looked round, as if hoping to peer a sign pointing them in the proper path. That they had in no way been advised wherein Dumbledore lived, nor did they know each person who had been sent to see him. "We'll simply need to," Harry commenced, but a voice rang throughout the hall. "What are you three doing in her?" It become Professor McGonagall, carrying a massive pile of books. "We need to peer Professor Dumbledore," stated Hermione, as an alternative bravely, Harry and Ron thought. See Professor Dumbledore? Professor McGonagall repeated, as even though this become a completely fishy issue to need to do. Why? Harry swallowed. Now what? It's sort of mystery, he said, however he wanted without delay he hadn't, because. Professor McGonagall's nostrils flared. Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes in the past, she stated coldly. He obtained impressing L from the Ministry of Magic and flew off for London as soon as. He's long gone, said Harry frantically. Now? Professor Dumbledore is a very wonderful wizard, Potter, he has many needs on his time. However, that is critical. Something you've got to mention is more crucial than the Ministry of Magic, Potter? Look, stated Harry, throwing warning to the winds, Professor, it's about the Sorcerer's Stone. Something Professor McGonagall had expected, it wasn't that. The books she was wearing tumbled out of her fingers, however she didn't pick them up. How do, she spluttered. Professor, I assume, I understand, that someone's going to try and thieve the stone. I've got to talk to Professor Dumbledore. She eyed him with an aggregate of shock and suspicion. Professor Dumbledore may be again tomorrow, she stated in the end. I don't recognize how you determined out about the stone, however relaxation confident, no one can possibly thieve it, it's too properly covered. However, Professor Potter, I know what I'm talking about, she stated quickly. She bent down and accrued up the fallen books. I recommend you all go again outdoor and experience the sunshine. However, they didn't. It's tonight, stated Harry. Once he became positive Professor McGonagall changed into out of earshot. Snape's going through the trapdoor tonight. He's found out the entirety he desires, and now we're given Dumbledore out of the matter. He sent that notice. I guess the Ministry of Magic will get a real surprise while Dumbledore turns up. But what are we able to? Hermione gasped. Harry and Ron wheeled spherical. Snape turned into status there. Top afternoon, he said easily. They stared at him. You shouldn't be inner on an afternoon like this, he stated, with an strange, twisted smile. We had been, Harry began, without any idea what he turned into going to mention. You need to be greater cautious, said Snape. Placing round like this, humans will assume you're as much as something. And Gryffindor in reality can't afford to lose any extra factors, can it? Harry flushed. They turned to head out of doors, but Snape known as them returned. Be warned, Potter, any greater midnight wanderings, and I will, in my opinion, ensure you are expelled. Appropriate day to you. He strode off inside the path of the staff room. Out at the stone steps, Harry grew to become to the others. Proper, right, here's what we were given to do, he whispered urgently. One of us has got to hold an eye on Snape, wait outside the workforce room and follow him if he leaves it. Hermione, you'd hire do this. Why me? It's apparent, stated Ron. You can fake to be looking ahead to Professor Flitwick, you realize. He put on a high voice, oh Professor Flitwick, I'm so involved, I assume I got question 14b wrong. Oh, shut up, stated Hermione, however she agreed to go and watch out for Snape, and we'd better live outside the 1/3 floor hall, Harry informed Ron. Come on. But that a part of the plan didn't work. No sooner had they reached the door separating Fluffy from the rest of the school than Professor McGonagall became up once more, and this time, she lost her temper. I assume you believe you studied your harder to get beyond than 8% of enchantments, she stormed. Enough of this nonsense. If I listen you've come anywhere near right here again, I'll take any other 50 factors from Gryffindor. Yes, Weasley, from my own residence. Harry and Ron went again to the not unusual room, Harry had simply said, at Least Hermione's on Snape's tail, whilst the portrait of the fat lady swung open. And Hermione came in. "I'm sorry, Harry," she wailed. "Snape got here out and requested me what I turned into doing, so I said I was looking ahead to Flitwick, and Snape went to get him, and I've only simply were given away. I don't realize where Snape went." "Well, that's it then, isn't it?" Harry said. The other stared at him. He became light and his eyes have been glittering. "I'm going out of right here this night and then I'm going to try to get to the stone first." "You're mad," stated Ron. "You can't," said Hermione. "After what McGonagall and Snape have stated? You'll be expelled." "So what?" Harry shouted. "Don't you understand? If Snape gets preserve of the stone, Voldemort's coming again. Haven't you heard what it changed into like? When he changed into seeking to take over? There gain't be any Hogwarts to get expelled from. He'll flatten it, or flip it into a school for the darkish arts. Dropping points. Doesn't remember anymore, can't you see? Do you believe you studied? He'll leave you and your families alone if Gryffindor wins the Residence Cup? If I get stuck earlier than I will get to the stone, well, I'll should pass return to the Dursleys and watch for Voldemort to find me there. It's simplest loss of life a bit later than I might have, because I'm in no way going over to the darkish aspect. I'm going through that trapdoor tonight and not anything you say is going to forestall me. Voldemort killed my mother and father, bear in mind." He glared at them. "You're right, Harry," stated Hermione in a small voice. "I'll use the invisibility cloak," stated Harry. "It's just fortunate I were given it returned." "However, will it cowl all three folks?" said Ron. All three people? Oh, come off it, you don't assume we'd let you cross alone?" "Of route no longer," said Hermione swiftly. "How do you observe you'd get to the stone without us?" "I'd higher move and took via my books, there might be something useful. However, if we get stuck, you might be expelled, too." "Not if I will help it," stated Hermione grimly. "Flitwick instructed me in secret that I got 112% on his exam. They're now not throwing me out after that." After dinner, the three of them sat nervously aside inside the common room. Nobody stricken them, not one of the Gryffindors had something to mention to Harry any more, in any case. This turned into the primary night he hadn't been disenchanted by means of it. Hermione turned into skimming through all her notes, hoping to encounter one of the enchantments they were about to try to interrupt. Harry and Ron didn't talk plenty. Each of them had been considering what they had been about to do. Slowly, the room emptied as people drifted off to bed. "Better get the cloak," Ron muttered, as Lee Jordan ultimately left, stretching and yawning. Harry ran upstairs, to their dark dormitory. He pulled out the cloak and then his eyes fell on the flute Hagrid had given him for Christmas. He pocketed it to use on Fluffy. He didn't sense similar to making a song. He ran back off to the common room. "We'd higher position the cloak on here, and make certain it covers all three people. If Filch spots one among our toes wandering along on its own." "What are you doing?" stated a voice from the nook of the room. Neville seemed from behind an armchair, clutching Trevor the Toad, who regarded as though he'd been making any other bid for freedom. "Not anything, Neville, nothing," stated Harry, hurriedly placing the cloak behind his lower back. Neville stared at their responsible faces. "You're going out once more," he said. No, said Hermione. "No, we're no longer." "Why don't you go to bed, Neville?" Harry checked out the grandfather clock through the door. They couldn't have enough money to waste any greater time. Snape may even now be playing Fluffy to sleep. "You could exit," said Neville. "You'll be stuck once more. Gryffindor will be in even extra trouble." "You don't understand," stated Harry, "that is essential." But Neville was really steeling himself to do something desperate. I won't can help you do it, he said, hurrying to stand in front of the portrait. Hollow. I'll combat you. Neville, Ron exploded, escape from that hollow, and don't be an idiot. Don't you call me an idiot, stated Neville. I don't think you ought to be. Breaking any extra guidelines. And also you were the only who informed me to get up to. Human beings. Sure, however no longer to us, stated Ron in exasperation. Neville, you don't recognize what you're doing. He took a breakthrough and Neville dropped Trevor the Toad, who leapt out of sight. Move on then, try to hit me, stated Neville, elevating his fists. I'm geared up, Harry became to Hermione. Do something, he said desperately. Hermione advanced. Neville, she said, I'm genuinely, surely sorry about this. She raised her wand. Petrificus totalis, she cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's hands snapped to his aspects. His legs sprang collectively. His complete body rigid, he swayed wherein he stood, after which fell flat on his face, stiff as a board. Hermione ran to turn him over. Neville's jaws had been jammed collectively so he couldn't communicate. Most effective, his eyes had been moving, searching at them in horror. What be you achieved to him? Harry whispered. It's the whole body bind, stated Hermione miserably. Oh, Neville, I'm so sorry. We had to, Neville, no time to give an explanation for, said Harry. You'll understand later, Neville, stated Ron as they stepped over him and pulled at the invisibility cloak. However, leaving Neville mendacity immobile on the floor didn't experience like a very correct omen. In their frightened state, every statue's shadow gave the look of filch, each distant breath of wind sounded like Peeves swooping down on them. On the foot of the primary set of stairs, they noticed Mrs. Norris skulking close to the pinnacle. Oh, let's kick her, simply this as soon as, Ron whispered in Harry's ear, however. Harry shook his head. As they climbed cautiously around her, Mrs. Norris turned her lamp-like eyes on them, however didn't do something. They didn't meet all people else until they reached the staircase as much as the 0.33 ground. Peeves turned into bobbing halfway up, loosening the carpet in order that human beings would experience. Who's there? He stated all of a sudden as they climbed closer to him. He narrowed his depraved black eyes. Realize you're there, even supposing I'm able to see you. Are you gully or ghosty or wee pupil beastie? He rose up inside the air and floated there, squinting at them. Should call Filch, I ought to, if something's creeping round unseen. Harry had a surprising idea. Peeves, he said, in a hoarse whisper, the Bloody Baron has his own motives for being invisible. Peeves nearly fell out of the air in surprise. He stuck himself in time and hovered about a foot off the stairs. So sorry, your bloodiness, Mr. Baron, sir, he stated greasily. My mistake, I didn't see you, of rude I didn't, you're invisible. Forgive vintage Peevesy his little shaggy dog story, sir. I have business here, Peeves, croaked Harry. Live far from this region tonight. I'm able to, sir, I maximum simply will, stated Peeves, growing up in the air again. Hope your enterprise goes properly, Baron, I'll no longer trouble you. And he scooted off. Superb, Harry, whispered Ron. Some seconds later, they were there, outside the third ground corridor. And the door became already ajar. Nicely, there you are, Harry stated quietly, Snape's already got beyond. Fluffy. Seeing the open door someway seemed to impress upon all three of them. What changed into dealing with them? Below the cloak, Harry grew to become to the opposite too. If you need to move back, I won't blame you, he said. You can take the cloak, I received want it now. Don't be stupid, stated Ron. We're coming, stated Hermione. Harry pushed the door open. Because the door creaked, low, rumbling growls met their ears. All three of the canine's noses sniffed madly in their path, although it couldn't see them. "What's that at its FT?" Hermione whispered. "Looks as if a harp," said Ron. "Snape must have left it there." "It need to awaken the instant you forestall gambling," stated Harry. "Well, here is going." He placed Hagrid's flute to his lips and blew. It wasn't honestly a song, but from the first word the beast's eyes began to stoop. Harry rarely drew breath. Slowly, the dog's growls ceased, it tottered on its paws and fell to its knees, then it slumped to the ground, rapid asleep. "Keep gambling," Ron warned Harry as they slipped out of the cloak and crept toward the trapdoor. They could feel the canine's warm, smelly breath as they approached the large heads. "I think we'll be able to pull the door open," stated Ron, peering over the dogs, returned. "Need to go first, Hermione?" "No, I don't." "All right." Ron gritted his teeth and stepped cautiously over the dog's legs. He bent and pulled the hoop of the trapdoor, which swung up and open. "What are you able to see?" Hermione stated anxiously. "Nothing, simply black. There's no manner of hiking down, we'll simply need to drop." Harry, who changed into still gambling the flute, waved at Ron to get his attention. And pointed at himself. "You need to move first?" "Are you certain?" stated Ron. "I don't understand how deep this thing is going." "Supply the flute to Hermione so she will hold him asleep." Harry surpassed the flute over. Inside the few seconds' silence, the dog growled and twitched, but the second Hermione started out to play, it returned into its deep sleep. Harry climbed over it and looked down through the trapdoor. There has been no sign of the lowest. He diminished himself through the hole till he turned into placing on with the aid of his fingertips. Then he seemed up at Ron and said, "If anything occurs to me, don't observe. Move straight to the Ollery and ship Hedwig to Dumbledore, right?" "Proper," said Ron. "See you in a minute, I am hoping." And Harry let pass. Cold, damp air rushed past him as he fell down, 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 and flump. With a funny, muffled type of thump he landed on something gentle. He sat up and felt round, his eyes not used to the gloom. It felt as though he became sitting on a few kind of plant. It's he known as much as the light the scale of a postage stamp, which became the open trapdoor. "It's a gentle touchdown, you could bounce." Ron observed proper away. He landed, sprawled subsequent to Harry. "What's these items?" had been his first phrases. "Dunno, some type of plant element. I assume it's here to break the fall." "Come on, Hermione." The remote track stopped. There has been a loud bark from the canine, however. Hermione had already jumped. She landed on Harry's other facet. "We need to be miles beneath the faculty," she said. "Fortunate this plant element's here, truly," said Ron. "Fortunate," shrieked Hermione. "Look at you both." She leapt up and struggled toward a humid wall. She had to battle. Due to the fact the moment she had landed, the plant had started to curve snake-like tendrils around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in lengthy creepers without their noticing. Hermione had managed to free herself earlier than the plant were given a company grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the two boys fought to pull the plant off them, but the greater they strained against it, the tighter and quicker the plant wound round them. "Forestall moving," Hermione ordered them. "I realize what this is, it's devil's snare." "Oh, I'm so happy we recognize what it's called. That's an incredible assist," snarled Ron, leaning again, trying to prevent the plant from curling round his neck. "Close up, I'm seeking to remember the way to kill it," stated Hermione. "Well, hurry up, I wilt breathe." Harry gasped, wrestling with it as it curled around his chest. Satan's snare, devil's snare, what did Professor Sprout say? It likes the dark and the damp. So light a fireplace. Harry choked. Sure, of path, however, there's no wooden. Hermione cried, wringing her fingers. Have you ever gone mad? Ron bellowed. Are you a witch or not? Oh, right, said Hermione, and he or she whipped out her wand, waved it, muttered something, and sent a jet of the same bluebell flame she had used on Snape on the plant. In a depend of seconds, the two boys felt it loosening its grip. Because it cringed away from the light and warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled itself from their bodies, and they were in a position to drag unfastened. Fortunate you pay interest in herbology, Hermione, stated Harry as he joined her by means of the wall, wiping sweat off his face. Yeah, said Ron, and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a disaster. There's no timber, sincerely. This manor, stated Harry, pointing down a stone passageway, which became the only manor forward. All they might hear apart from their footsteps turned into the mild drip of water trickling down the walls. The passageway sloped downward, and Harry changed into reminded of Gringotts. With an unsightly jolt of the coronary heart, he remembered the dragon said to be guarding vaults within the wizard's bank. In the event that they met a dragon, a fully grown dragon, Norbert were awful sufficient. Are you able to hear something? Ron whispered. Harry listened. A smooth rustling and clinking regarded to be coming from up in advance. Do you observe it's a ghost? I don't recognize, appears like wings, to me. There's light beforehand, I'm able to see something transferring. They reached the stop of the passageway and saw earlier than them a brilliantly lit chamber, its ceiling arching high above them. It turned into full of small, jewel-vibrant birds, fluttering and tumbling all around the room. On the opposite aspect of the chamber, become a heavy wooden door. Do you suspect they'll assault us if we cross the room? Said Ron. Probably, said Harry. They don't appearance very vicious, however I think if they all swooped down immediately, properly, there's no other choice, I'll run. He took a deep breath, protected his face with his palms, and sprinted throughout the room. He anticipated to feel sharp beaks and claws tearing at him any 2D, but not anything befell. He reached the door untouched. He pulled the deal with, but it became locked. The other accompanied him. They tugged and heaved on the door, but it wouldn't budge, not even if Hermione attempted her Alohomora allure. Now what? Stated Ron. Those birds, they can't be right here only for decoration, stated Hermione. They watched the birds soaring overhead, glittering. They're now not birds. Harry said all of a sudden. They're keys. Winged keys. Appearance carefully. So that have to suggest, he looked across the chamber while the other two squinted up at the flock of keys. Sure, look. Broomsticks. Were given to seize the key to the door. However, there are loads of them. Ron examined the lock at the door. We're searching out a huge A2EAT4E17995-4BKX0423CB21, in all likelihood silver, just like the manage. They each seized a broomstick and kicked off into the air, soaring into the midst of the cloud of keys. They grabbed and snatched, but the bewitched keys darted and dived so fast it turned into nearly impossible to seize one. Now not for nothing, though, changed into Harry the youngest seeker in a century. He had a knack for recognizing things different humans didn't. After a minute's weaving about through the whirl of rainbow feathers, he noticed a large silver key that had a dishonest wing, as if it had already been caught and filled kind of into the keyhole. That one, he known as to the others. That massive one, there. With vibrant blue wings, the feathers are all crumpled on one facet. Ron went speeding in the route that Harry turned into pointing, crashed into the ceiling, and almost fell off his broom. "We've got to shut in on it," Harry referred to as, now not taking his eyes off the important thing. "With the broken wing." "Ron, you come back at it from above, Hermione, live beneath and forestall it from happening, and that I'll try and catch it." "Right, now." Ron dived, Hermione rocketed upward, the important thing dodged them each, and Harry streaked after it. It sped closer to the wall. Harry leaned forward and with a nasty, crunching noise, pinned it against the stone with one hand. Ron and Hermione's cheers echoed around the high chamber. They landed quickly, and Harry ran to the door, the important thing suffering in his hand. He rammed it into the lock and turned. It worked. The instant the lock had clicked open, the important thing took flight once more, searching, very battered now that it had been caught twice. "Ready?" Harry requested the alternative too, his hand on the door coped with. They nodded. He pulled the door open. The next chamber turned into so dark they couldn't see something at all. However, as they stepped into it, light all at once flooded the room to expose a mind-blowing sight. They had been standing on the edge of a huge chessboard, behind the black chessmen, which had been all taller than they had been and carved from what appeared like black stone. Facing them, manner across the chamber, had been the white pieces. Harry, Ron and Hermione shivered slightly. The towering white chessmen had no faces. "Now what can we do?" Harry whispered. "It's obvious, isn't it?" said Ron. "We were given to play our way throughout the room. In the back of the white pieces, they might see another door." "How?" said Hermione nervously. "I assume," said Ron, "we're going to have to be chessmen." He walked up to a black knight and placed his hand out to touch the knight's horse. Straight away, the stone sprang to existence. The pony pawed the floor and the knight grew to become his helmeted head to look down at Ron. "Can we, ought to be a part of you to get across?" The Black Knight nodded. Ron grew to become to the other. "This desires considering," he stated. "I assume we've got to take the location of 3 of the black pieces." Harry and Hermione stayed quiet, looking Ron suppose. Finally he said, "Now, don't be indignant or something, but neither of you're that correct at chess." "We're not angry," stated Harry quick. "Simply inform us what to do." "Well, Harry, you are taking the place of that bishop, and Hermione, you subsequent to him as opposed to that citadel." "What approximately you?" "I'm going to be a knight," stated Ron. The chessmen seemed to have been listening, due to the fact at those phrases a knight, a bishop, and a citadel grew to become their backs at the white portions and walked off the board, leaving 3 empty squares that Harry, Ron, and Hermione took. "White always performs first in chess," said Ron, peering throughout the board. "Yes, appearance." A white pawn had moved ahead 2 squares. Ron started to direct the black pieces. They moved silently any place he sent them. Harry's knees have been trembling. What if they misplaced? Harry passed diagonally 4 squares to the right. Their first real shock got here while their different knight changed into taken. The white queen smashed him to the ground and dragged him off the board, where he lay pretty still, face down. "Had to permit that show up," said Ron, looking shaken. "Leaves you unfastened too. Take that bishop, Hermione, move on." On every occasion one and all their guise was misplaced, the white pieces showed no mercy. Soon there has been a huddle of limp, black gamers slumped along the wall. 2 times, Ron simplest just observed in time that Harry and Hermione had been in risk. He himself darted around the board, taking nearly as many white portions as that they had lost black ones. "We're almost there," he muttered suddenly. Let me think." The White Queen turned her clean face closer to him. Sure, stated Ron softly, it's the handiest way, I've got to be taken. No. Harry and Hermione shouted. That's chess, snapped Ron. You were given to make some sacrifices. I take one step forward and he or she'll take me, that leaves you free to checkmate. The king, Harry. But. Do you want to prevent Snape or now not? Ron. Appearance, if you don't hurry up, he'll have already got the stone. There has been no alternative. Prepared? Ron called, his face pale, however determined. Here I am going, now, don't hang around after you've won. He stepped forward, and the White Queen pounced. She struck Ron difficult. Across the head with her stone arm, and he crashed to the ground. Hermione screamed, however stayed on her square. The White Queen dragged Ron to at least one side. He appeared as if he'd been knocked out. Shaking, Harry moved 3 spaces to the left. The White King took off his crown and threw it at Harry's foot that they had received. The chessmen parted and bowed, leaving the door beforehand clear. With one closing desperate look back at Ron, Harry and Hermione charged through the door. And up the next passageway. What if He'll be all right, said Harry, seeking to convince himself. What do you reckon's next? We've had sprouts, that become the devil's snare. Flitwick should have put charms on the keys. McGonagall transfigured the chessmen to make them alive. That leaves Quirrell's spell, and Snape's. They had reached some other door. All right? Harry whispered. Move on. Harry pushed it open. A disgusting scent stuffed their nostrils, making both of them pull their robes up over their noses. Eyes watering, they saw, flat at the ground in front of them, a troll even larger than the one they'd tackled, out cold with a bloody lump on its head. I'm happy we didn't need to fight that one, Harry whispered as they stepped carefully over one and all its big legs. Come on, I'm able to breathe. He pulled open the next door, each of them hardly daring to observe what got here next. However, there has been not anything very horrifying in right here, only a table with 7 differently fashioned bottle status on it in a line. Snape's, stated Harry. What do we must do? They stepped over the edge, and right now a fireplace sprang up at the back of them inside the doorway. It wasn't everyday fireplace either, it was purple. On the identical instantaneous, black flames shot up in the doorway main onward. They were trapped. Appearance. Hermione seized a roll of paper lying next to the bottles. Harry regarded over her shoulder to read it. Risk lies earlier than you, while protection lies behind. 2 people will help you, whichever you'll discover. Considered one of us 7 will allow you to circulate ahead, another will transport the drinker back as a substitute. 2 among our range maintain best nettle wine, 3 people are killers, waiting bidden in line. Pick out, except you desire, to live right here forevermore. To help you in your desire, we provide you with those clues for. First, but slyly the poison tries to cover. You will always discover some on nettle wine's left facet. 2D, one of a kind, are people who stand at either cease. However, if you would flow onward, neither is your pal. 0.33, as you see sincerely, all are exceptional length, neither dwarf nor massive holds death in their insides. Fourth, the second one left and the second one at the right are twins when you taste them, even though one of a kind at first sight. Hermione let loose a super sigh and Harry, amazed, noticed that she became smiling. The final issue he felt like doing. Exquisite, said Hermione. This isn't magic, it's good judgment, a puzzle. A lot of the best wizards haven't got an oz of good judgment, they'd be stuck in right here all the time. However, so can we, received we? Of root now not, said Hermione. The whole lot we need is here in this paper. 7 bottles, 3 are poison, our wine, 1 gets us accurately through the black hearth, and 1 will get us returned via the red. However, how do we recognize which to drink? Give me a minute. Hermione studied the paper numerous times. Then she walked up and down the line of bottles, muttering to herself and pointing at them. At remaining, she clapped her arms. Got it, she stated. The smallest bottle will get us through the black fire, towards the stone. Harry checked out the tiny bottle. There's only enough there for one of us, he stated. That's infrequently one. Swallow. They looked at every other. Which one gets you lower back via the red flames? Hermione pointed at a rounded bottle on the right end of the line. You drink that, said Harry. No, listen, get lower back and get Ron. Seize. Brooms from the flying key room, they'll get you out of the trapdoor and beyond. Fluffy, move directly to the Ollery and ship Hedwig to Dumbledore, we need him. I is probably capable of hold Snape off for some time, but I'm no in shape for him, truly. But Harry, what if you recognize who's with him? Properly, I used to be fortunate once, wasn't I, said Harry, pointing at his scar. I might get lucky once more. Hermione's lip trembled, and she or he abruptly dashed at Harry and threw her arms round him. Hermione, Harry, you're an outstanding wizard, you already know. I'm now not as appropriate as you, stated Harry, very embarrassed as she permit cross of him. Me, said Hermione. Books. And cleverness. There are more crucial things, friendship and bravery and, oh Harry, be cautious. You drink first, said Harry. You're certain that is which, aren't you? Wonderful, said Hermione. She took a long drink from the round bottle at the quit and shuddered. It's no longer poison, said Harry anxiously. No, however, it's like ice. Short, go. Earlier than it wears off. Excellent luck, take care. Go. Hermione grew to become and walked straight via the purple fire. Harry took a deep breath and picked up the smallest bottle. He grew to become to face the black flames. Here I come, he said, and he drained the little bottle in a single gulp. It was certainly as although ice was flooding his frame. He positioned the bottle down and walked forward. He braced himself, noticed the black flames licking his body, however couldn't feel them. For a second he ought to see not anything but dark fire. Then he turned into on the opposite facet, in the remaining chamber. There was already someone there, however it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort.